Hi everybody, welcome to another video, fun facts all about food. Today we're going to be talking about milk. I get so many questions about milk, and I want to first start off by clarifying that when I use the word milk, if you ever hear me use the word milk, I am talking about milk from a mammal, not a plant. I will always be very specific if I talk about milk that comes from a plant, but in my book, milk comes from a mammal, and that's kind of the whole point. So mammal means mammary glands, that's where we get that word, and it refers to mammals having the ability to feed their young from the female breast tissue or the mammary glands. That's where the word mammal comes from. So humans obviously have milk, cows obviously have milk, but so do dogs and horses and any mammal that you can think of. All mammalian milk has protein, fat, carbs, vitamins, and minerals. And that's what's kind of cool about it. Not a lot of substances have protein, fat, and carbs, but it makes sense when you think about it because a baby mammal has to survive on just that one substance for some period of time. So it has to be a pretty complete food. That being said, it's not a complete food. It does not have any fiber, and it doesn't have all the vitamins and minerals that a mammal will eventually need as it grows. So other foods do get introduced at some point, but it's a very cool food for babies. Now, here's the question. Is it weird to drink the milk of another mammal? And I mean, I think it's really a philosophical question at the end of the day, weird or not. The reality is we've been doing it for a very long time. 9,000 BC to be specific is when we have evidence of humans starting to domesticate and drink the milk of herds of cattle and things like that. So it's been around for a very long time, but there is a key difference. Way back then, people were not drinking the liquid milk. Adults did not have the ability to digest lactose. So they would ferment the milk into things like yogurt and cheese, and that's how they would consume it, because when you ferment dairy, bacteria eat the lactose, and so by the time you eat it, the lactose is pretty much gone or very low, so it's much more tolerable. However, thousands of years ago, there was a genetic mutation allowing adults to maintain the lactase enzyme into adulthood. And so people did start to be able to have liquid milk into adulthood, which was a life-saving thing because there were times when there was not other food available, and milk gave people the calories they needed to get through tough times. So nowadays, many adults can tolerate lactose, although not all. It kind of depends on your ancestry. So milk's been around for a really long time. That being said, not all populations do have a history with milk. Certainly, you can survive without milk. You don't need it. Now, you do need something as an infant, and it is worth noting that people used to breastfeed a lot longer than the 6 months to a year that we mostly do now. But in the long run, no, you do not need milk. Humans have existed without it, and they have existed with it for a really long time. So what is milk? Really, it's water. It's largely water. Milk is 88% water, which is why it can hydrate babies so well, and we don't have to give babies separate milk. It's also carbs, fat, and protein. So it's about 5% carbohydrate, that's that lactose, among others. It's about 3% protein, that's gonna be like casein and whey and a few other types of protein, and then it's about 3% fat, and then about 1% vitamins and minerals. So let's talk really quick about the carbs. I already kind of mentioned it. Lactose is one of the primary carbs, and it does require an enzyme called lactase in order to break it up and allow it to be absorbed into your blood. If you don't have enough lactase, that carbohydrate will travel to your colon, where the bacteria in your colon will eat it, producing a lot of gas, which can lead to stomach upset, bloating, gassiness, that sort of thing. So that's usually the symptom of lactose intolerance. They do sell milk, Lactaid brand, which is just milk that already has lactase in it, so the carbohydrates are basically pre-digested in the milk, so you don't have to do it yourself. The next thing I want to talk about is the protein. The protein in milk is actually probably where a lot of the problems people have with milk come from. First and foremost, that's the allergenic part of milk. So if somebody has a milk allergy, it's the milk protein that they are allergic to. What's interesting about milk proteins is they differ from breed to breed of cow and from mammal to mammal, which is why somebody who has a milk allergy can still have their mother's breast milk. It's a different protein in there. And you may see people who can't have cow's milk, but they do okay with goat milk. The proteins in milk can cause a straight up allergic reaction. They can also cause some stomach upset if you are having a hard time breaking them apart, if you're missing some of the enzymes needed. And then it can also cause some congestion is a common side effect of intolerance to milk proteins. So most people who struggle with milk, the proteins are usually at fault. Last but not least, there's the fat part of milk. Ironically, this is something that hardly anybody has trouble digesting. Milk fat's actually very easy to digest and metabolize. The history of skim milk boils my blood. You guys, it had nothing to do with health, nothing whatsoever. So basically, skim milk is a byproduct of butter. If you leave a cup of milk, a gallon of milk out, fresh milk, the fat will come to the top, and then they would skim that off, churn it, and they would turn it into butter, and then the byproduct of that would be buttermilk. But when you skim off that 3% of the milk that's fat, that leaves you 97% of skim milk, which is just water, protein, and carbs. And they used to just feed it to livestock, or honestly, just send it down the river, and it was just kind of a waste product. But for World War II, they discovered that they could actually make powdered skim milk that they could send with the troops. So it was a big boon for the milk industry, a lot less waste. They started to actually make money off of the skim milk, which usually was worth very little. And when the war ended, the industry did not want to go back to wasting that skim milk. So in the 1950s, they started a campaign telling people that they could lose weight if they switched to skim milk. Keep in mind, there wasn't a huge weight problem yet. There would be soon. But they basically just capitalized on affluent customers that were, wanted to look good, and so they sold them skim milk. It had nothing to do with health. It was honestly just a play for the dairy industry to make money on what was otherwise kind of a waste product. So anyhow, I am a big proponent of whole milk. As you guys know, it's the only milk we use in our house, and the only one I recommend to my clients. Last but not least, let's talk a little bit about pasteurization and homogenization. So pasteurization was invented in 1864. Relatively new if you keep in mind that milk has been around since 9000 BC. So pretty new process. And they discovered that it could kill all of the bacteria in the milk, thus making it theoretically safer. I have some thoughts on this. When you kill off the bacteria, you also kill off a lot of the beneficial properties in milk. When a baby breastfeeds, they are getting raw milk, right? Unpasteurized milk. And that's how they get all of that immunity and all the great properties in milk that are not there in a pasteurized milk at the grocery store. I don't let myself get too worked up about this though, because the reality of our life today is that raw milk is actually illegal in a lot of states, my own state included. So while I deep down would probably prefer raw milk, it's not really a viable option. So I just don't think about it too much. That being said, I do appreciate dairies that use batch pasteurization, where they can use a much lower temperature as opposed to this ultra pasteurized milk that we're seeing now, which is at like a crazy, crazy high temperature. So that's something to look for on your milk labels. Homogenization is another one that's really interesting. That's even more recent. That was invented in like 1899 and didn't really hit the supermarket shelves till like 1920s. And that's just the idea of mushing all the fat globules together with the protein molecules by putting them through really, really small holes at a really high pressure. And the concern is that this might be why milk allergies are on the rise, or at least it may play a role, because it's changing the chemical structure of the milk. And there's really no reason for homogenization other than it prevents you from having to go like this before you pour your milk. So I actually prefer brands that are not homogenized. I'm not totally strict about this. I do buy brands that are homogenized if that's all I can find. But I often go with this Kelowna Supernatural, which is semi-local. It's like from Iowa. It's a Midwestern brand, and they do sell non-homogenized milk. So that's one of my favorite brands out there. So hopefully that answers your guys' questions about milk. I'm gonna come back with a part 2 video on my thoughts about plant milks, and they're mostly not great, but I have some pros. So we'll talk soon. Have a great day, everybody.